Worst time to figure out what you're going to say to someone is while you're saying it. I think that if you're not a master of communication, you're never going to rise to that luxury space. And this is luxury presence, right?
Is there a testing phase that happens?
Roleplay, baby. We do it every day at 7:45 in the morning.
You literally have a flow chart of scripts. Is that right?
Yes, but I think, again, back to it's more of a framework of asking the right questions. All the agents, the buyer and seller, all have a shared goal. We forget that we all have the same goal.
Welcome to the A-List. My name is Chris Lancel, Director of Content here at Luxury Presence. Today, I'm joined by Ben Belack, Director of Residential Estates at the agency in Beverly Hills. Ben is an incredibly prepared sales professional, and he uses scripts to power his success, but maybe not in the way that you think. Today, we're diving into the role that scripts can play in a successful real estate professional's strategy and how they can use this strategy to power 2025 and beyond. Ben, welcome to the A-List.
I'm happy to be here.
Ben, you are a uniquely experienced sales professional. You spent time as a certified sommelier. You sold your own services as a bona fide on-screen actor. You know what it takes to sell stuff. I want to know how you have come to the point in your career where you are relying on scripts as much as you and your team are.
I don't know when I became obsessed with language and the way we say things, but the way we communicate with one another is probably the most important part of sales and most importantly, service. Someone really smart by the name of Phil Jones said the worst time to figure out what you're going to say to someone is while you're saying it. And that really landed with me. I had a couple instances with clients where I was getting massive price improvements and I expected the clients to hate me for it, but we're still buds to this day, long after they ended up selling their house for less than what they bought it for as a device of market conditions, not anything I did. And so I became obsessed with that feeling. I didn't want to be declaring war on the clients. So everything that we say to our current clients and prospects is really planned out and rehearsed.
So you say everything. You literally have a flow chart of scripts. Is that right?
We do a lot of prospecting of expired and canceled listings on my team. This is widely known because I'm not from Los Angeles. And when I wanted to start selling homes that were $10 million, that were going to the agents that had been in the business for 2 decades or grew up here, I knew that the sellers would agree with me on at least one thing if I could navigate this gauntlet of the insane level of calls they were getting, is that the last agent maybe didn't do such a good job. To get those appointments, I had to be really good on the phone because those prospects are getting calls at 7:30 in the morning and like in the hundreds and across days. So that kind of led to creating a flow chart where agents on my team can start with the flow chart instead of trying to memorize and be flustered and then ultimately get hung up on.
So is there a particular place that you feel like your team most benefits from these scripts? Is it the top of the funnel? Or is there another place in the funnel where these scripts are the most valuable?
Anyone can stay in touch with top of funnel leads. It's one thing to get a listing. It's another one to get it under contract. And then it's another to get it over the finish line. So my value, aside from all the accountability and the technology and all this stuff that I give as a leader and as a mentor and as a coach to my own coaching clients, is in the deal doctoring. And I believe that the things that we say to our clients, most importantly, the things that we ask them, are the most important elements to achieving the shared goal, right? All the agents, the buyer and seller, all have a shared goal. We forget that we all have the same goal a lot of the time. We use scripting. I hate to say it, I hate to label it as scripting because there's a stigma attached to scripts. We sound salesy, and because we're commission-based, the consumers at large are skeptical of our intentions, just like they're skeptical of a car salesperson because they get paid when a transaction occurs. However, I do know that we have a shared goal and we're the objective peacemakers and collaborators to get it there, and that takes language.
So you hit on a really interesting point, which is scripts and the use of scripts kind of add to this polarized attitude around sales professionals. And I think a lot of early real estate agents look at scripts as being inauthentic, or like they are not able to truly represent their own value because they don't actually get to choose their own words. I would venture to say that that's incorrect, but I'd love to hear your perspective on that objection to using scripts.
To me, scripts are more of a framework. There was a time in the beginning, and I was getting a lot of appointments by starting with a very strong closing statement when I would prospect to these bottom of funnel expired and canceled listing leads. There was a moment in my life where I started shifting that to asking more questions, because I learned the person who's asking the questions is in control of the conversation, just like the one we're having now. You're very much in control of it because you're asking me all the questions. And as I'm explaining to you, you're learning about me, and you're also devising probably your next question and where you want this conversation to go. Even that slight shift, that change in format and framework with the consumers can change a salesperson's life. So we can call it scripts if we want, because that's an easily definable term. But for me, it's more of a framework and a format of communication. And I think that if you're not a master of communication, not just knowing the what, but the when, you're never going to rise to that relative luxury space. And this is luxury presence, right? We're talking about luxury.
Yeah.
We're talking about the 6-figure commission checks.
So let's go into the details here. What's the process of starting to develop one of these frameworks to support your goals?
An attorney doesn't ask someone sitting on the witness chair a question that they don't think they know the answer to, right? Because then this testimony can then spin out of control. I don't want to have to think on my feet. Now, granted, I'm pretty good at that, but I don't want to do it. What I'd like to do is I want to ask a question of a prospect or a client where I know that only one or two potential answers are there. Maybe they're just yes or no. I don't want big open-ended answers. So if I can kind of push them towards, by asking a specific question, a few answers, and then I know how I'm going to tackle those answers, then we can move towards the outcome that I want to achieve. I don't start from a blank piece of paper. We usually start from what do we want to get to, and what are the ways that we could potentially end there? And then we create a question and answer set around all those possibilities.
So using that approach, is there a testing phase that happens?
Oh, yeah.
Are you putting in reps and judging the answers?
It's called Roleplay, baby. We do it every day at 7:45 in the morning for 15 minutes. And then we hop on our dialer and we do the hardest part every morning, because we want to get that out of the way. We want to feel accomplished. But yes, you got to role play. You don't want to practice on the clients. At some point, you got to get in the arena, but you don't want to practice on the clients. So, but yeah, sometimes when I have an extremely unreasonable client who's not really receptive to logic and data, before getting on that call, I'll role play it a few times with a team member so we can practice before the conversation starts. And it's tremendously effective.
Do you find that there are members of your team that struggle to make these prepared questions or responses feel natural? Or is this something that as soon as you start getting some success under your belt, the delivery of these things feels more like organic?
Agents say they don't want to make calls because they don't know what to say. When you know what you're going to say, you don't feel salesy. You feel like an advisor. So if you practice, like, you'd be surprised. I've had agents role play for a week, and on that first Friday, they're setting appointments. It's not rocket science what we do. It's so with practice, stuff can happen really quickly, like really quickly. So I would say no. It's shockingly fast how someone makes a script their own, and then I yell at them to say what I tell them to say.
I want to do a quick rapid fire. I want to list off some scenarios. Tell me whether or not you have a script for these particular scenarios. Sure. Okay. Price improvement. Coaching a seller through an offer that's lower than they expected.
Yeah, of course. But everything's a question. Like almost 99%, probably like 99% of the time, I ask them to explain more about how they're feeling. You know, I'm like, can you help me? And usually it's in a tone like the sales guy, Jeremy Lee Minor, who's known for his opens, where he's like trying to like enroll the client to kind of help me solve this problem. So like, could you help me understand like what you would like to see out of this offer? And like as I'm slowing it down, I'm like de-escalating it. I'm kind of enrolling you to just like help me get it. I'm not like cramming the comps down their throat, right? So by seeking understanding and getting people to explain, we slow down, and there are more, once they feel heard, they're ready for coaching and advisory.
How about approaching an expired?
Oh my God, yeah. That one's I'm notorious for.
How about approaching a past client who may be exhibiting signs that they're ready to buy or sell again?
It's all simpler than you think, because I'm not like, we don't have like this script. We're just asking questions, like really specific questions. Like, here, let me give you an example really quick. What causes, I'll ask you a question now. When you are getting an onslaught of phone calls throughout the day, just as a citizen of the United States, you are a citizen of the United States, right?
We're not going to talk about it.
Okay. Yes. As a human on the planet,
yes,
you probably get, how many you think? Like 3 to 7
at least
calls of solicitation a day. The ones where you hang up near immediately, what is the trigger for you to hang up immediately?
The trigger for me is that it is clear the person on the other end of the phone doesn't actually know who I am and what's important to me. That I am just some name on a computer screen.
I'm going to add a couple. You tell me if like that contributes or wouldn't.
Please, that's great.
What if they're like, hey, how's it going today?
That is a little disarming, and I maybe delay for a second.
But you still hang up.
I still hang up very quickly.
What if their voice is like real high? Hello?
I definitely hang up very quickly then.
Okay, yeah. So like all these things that are demonstrative of sales, and thus you're met with friction. What if your house was listed on the market for 6 months and you're getting like all these calls all of a sudden from all these agents, and you're like, where were these people when it was listed 3 days ago, right? And someone calls you and just says like, hey, I saw 123 Banana Street came off the market, and I'm guessing you haven't figured out what you're gonna do with the property yet. What's your like natural? Well, you're like, I'll hang up.
No, actually, I know. I can tell you immediately if somebody identified that they know who I am and the circumstance that I'm inside. If they also come at me with a question based in empathy, one that is directed towards providing value to me, ultimately, I do not hang up.
You open up a little.
Even if it's just a little, it is the same as sommelier Ben. When somebody comes to my table in a restaurant and says, I see that you ordered the steak. I just wanted to let you know we have a new wine that just came in that would be phenomenal with this. It is a small piece of personalization to that service. I will absolutely consider that wine in a way that I wouldn't before.
Yeah, and the difference is in that case, they're closing you a bit and saying, you have this, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Like these things kind of belong together, right? Whereas I'm actually trying to enroll you to help me solve a problem. Now, when you say to me, no, we haven't figured out what we're going to do with it yet, that gives me an opportunity to ask you another question. If you say, yes, we have, I know that there's likely 5 things that you're going to say that we have. We're staying, we're going to lease it out, we're waiting for the market to recover, we're going to keep working with the same agent, or we're going to lease it out. If I didn't say that already, I may have.
Lease it out twice.
Lease it out twice. So there's maybe 4 or one other.
Yeah.
But from those, I then have questions that corner people into that their rationalization maybe for not selling is maybe a little shallow, and there may be an opening for second expert opinion. So when you ask me, like, do I have the scripts? Do I have the scripts? Yes. But I think, again, back to it's more of a framework of asking the right questions.
Ben, I love your insights on this.
Thanks.
And I love your preparation, especially shifting from this idea of a 3-page script with every single letter and every single punctuation mark mapped out to a framework that offers questions to prompt people into the right headspace in order to develop that relationship with them.
Yeah. Well, you said empathy, and that's where it stems.
To those of you watching at home, if you want to take your business to the next level, Luxury Presence has the platforms and products to power the next chapter of your success. Thanks for joining us on the A-List.